Was it then shocking to kind of see the results from 10 years ago where you could see you severely allergic to now?
Completely. We rebuilt my gut health. We rebuilt my gut. And I think that was a huge lever for unlocking healing for me. So again, like in this kind of a methodology, it could just even be one thing that just affects your health. And
could you do me a massive favor and click follow or subscribe button? It helps the podcast out so much. Hello and welcome to another episode of Making Sayings. So I'm joined by Sonia Hunt, a TEDx speaker. She's the author of The Nut Job: How I Crushed My Food Allergies to Thrive. She's also a food allergy activist. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I feel like there's so much you've done. Is there anything I've missed off the list?
We can talk about all of it, but yeah, you covered it.
Yeah, thank you so much for kind of coming on the podcast. I just wanted to start off with the TED Talk, which you did. I mean, it's got over 1 million views now on YouTube. How did that opportunity come about to kind of talk about your food allergies on the TED stage?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I follow your work, and it's really amazing. So I'm grateful to be here. I've been publicly speaking about my story with severe food allergies, asthma, and environmental allergies. It's 13 years now. So I always say, like, even before we knew that word influencer, I was like out there sharing my story. And building my brand. My traditional career has been in marketing. So, I started building my brand and, building my advocacy platform. And by the time I did the TEDx talk in 2015, so by the time that came around, I had been out there already, and I'd been doing podcasts and on local television and blogging and on other people's blogs and so forth. So there's somebody from that committee that had heard of my brand, which is the way you always want to have your marketing work, right? And they asked if I would consider telling my story on the platform. I spoke here at San Francisco, so it was a TEDx in San Francisco. And locally, I've done a lot of work here, locally as well, for the food allergy awareness. So yeah, and when you are doing something like a TED Talk, it's very different than just like giving a quick presentation in the office.
It's been in my checklist of things to do. And obviously when I saw you did a TED Talk, I was like, that's what I really want to do. I mean, I think it's so incredible. If we go back to kind of the very beginning of your journey into food allergies, how old was you when you kind of got diagnosed and you found out?
Yeah, so 3 years old. It was a dinner party that my parents had with a lot of, their friends and the kids playing in the backyard. And it was a plate of snacks, which had peanut butter and jelly, sandwiches, kind of a few hours before dinner, which just, completely turned like a beautiful party into chaos. And so I immediately went into anaphylaxis, and the, saving grace was that in my family and extended family, my parents have a lot of friends that are physicians, so they happened to be at the party. So they knew exactly what was happening, as like the kids were screaming in the backyard and so forth. So we were after the ER, and then thereafter, after a lot of testing, we found out that I had a severe peanut, tree nut allergy, asthma, and just environmental allergies off the charts. I always say the only tree I'm not allergic to is the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So that was a big turning point for my family, who comes from India. My parents never knew that people could be allergic to food.
Really?
I was going
to say, was it not common at all then? Obviously, like you've kind of spoke about your parents being from India. Was it not common for other kids like your age or anyone you knew at that kind of stage with food allergies as well?
Yeah, there's nobody in our immediate family. And, later in the years when I talked to my parents about, that whole time period, they say that, you kind of like hear of people having some kind of sickness or the other, but it was never determined that somebody actually had food allergies. So they just didn't grow up knowing that could happen. And my siblings didn't have any health issues like that as well. So they were just very perplexed with like, how could, food cause such a reaction for one of our kids? And like,
Yeah.
why is this happening, right? Like, what exactly with this child's health is going on that it's, that this is happening? So it was completely new territory. I mean, they were in their 20s. Their parents are, thousands of miles away, and you now have to literally adjust not only, my life, but just, the entire life of our family and how we ate,
Yeah.
right?
How
So yeah.
how how is that kind of growing up on, like, because I know a lot of kids now are like dealing with kind of like the mental health implications of having allergies, like the anxiety or kind of worrying about eating out. Did you ever kind of experience that when you was kind of growing up with all these food allergies?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I just didn't really know it or understand. So, there was kind of like two sides of my protocol was all Western protocol. So at that time it was, don't eat the food you're not allergic to. So if you believe it, I mean, we were even, reading labels 20, 30 years ago. And labels have changed so much, right? So you can imagine
Mm.
that there was just very basic information at the
Yeah,
time.
I don't
Um,
used to remember the may contain, like when I was growing up. Like even then,
right.
like I feel like it's only been like the last like 10 years. Like it's been more
Yeah.
kind of at the forefront with what happened to Natasha and kind of other allergy stories. Like,
Exactly, exactly. So that was very limited. My mom was an amazing, cook. She started to just primarily cook meals, for me. And we focused only on one area my entire life, I would say, which was the physical health side. So making sure that like I had options, they were primarily homemade, but of course, from a cultural perspective, being first generation American, there's always a battle, right, between East versus West and wanting to eat the same kinds of foods that the kids that I was going to school with ate. And so we never sat and discussed mental health, emotional health, spiritual health with my doctors or as a family, just kind of culturally, there's also stigmas around mental health in certain cultures, like the Indian culture. Therapy is not something you traditionally, seek out. So really, it
has that
wasn't
changed? Has that
until,
changed now? Like the kind of
yeah,
the stigma around it, or would you still feel like it's still there potentially?
it's a good question because I think in my family, I forced that conversation as I got older.
Yeah,
I do feel like it is still a stigma in India and here in the US for kids like me who are first gen. Um, but I think with, health issues, disease, autoimmune disease, chronic disease, food allergies, we are now, these younger generations are forcing it to be a part of the conversation, just like I did.
yeah.
Because, it really was a realization in 2008 that it wasn't just kind of issues I was having physically. It was like, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I had so much like compounded detriment that I now had to work through as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's come to like more recently with there's just not enough like resource even in the UK for kind of like the mental implications of having allergy or kind of allergy anxiety, and there's not enough like kind of clinical kind of psychologists now which kind of specializes within allergy. So it's something which I feel has kind of come to like more often. I know you spoke about, obviously, have you had quite a few scary experiences where you've experienced kind of going into anaphylactic shock?
Yeah, so in my lifetime, it's happened 4 times, the last being in 2008, which was kind of even where my book really starts, and that happened after a time period of 13 years where there was no, severe emergent issues like that. So there were definitely like
Yeah,
hive issues and things like that. But so there's kind of this time period before 2008 where I felt like, oh, I figured it out. It's all gone.
yeah,
I can kind of do what I want. And then just like boom, I came home from a international business trip, was out at dinner, and a few hours later, ended up going into anaphylaxis. And again, thereafter, the testing, all the doctors concurred that it was a severe food allergy incident. They believe there's cross-contamination in the food. And there are also brand new allergies that just popped up when we tested. So the things that I was like never allergic to. So like halibut fish being one of them, corn, being another one. So it was a very rude awakening. That incident left me with hives all over my body for a year. And I mean, from in my scalps all the way down to like my toes, I had hives.
That really shocked me, because you don't really hear about, obviously with anaphylaxis, you don't really hear about the hives then kind of sticking around. But yeah, the fact that you had it for a year,
And so this is, again, like, it's good information, right? When I asked my allergist here, like, when is this going to go away? Because I spent 3 days in the ER. And so, he said, this can take some time. And I said, well, what's some time? Like a few days, a week? And he said, sometimes longer. Well, okay, like a month, sometimes longer. So it came to what he said is that, given the levels of toxicity in your body, it could, if this is like very severe, it could even take, a year or more, which, I just thought I would pass out at that point, because they were, raised pretty high. They were all over. And, soon thereafter, I was going back like to work and like, back to a normal life.
I know you spoke about like dating, right? And like, with all these hives. I mean, was there anyone else out there which had gone through the kind of same experience as you, where they've had these hives and obviously the hives wasn't going away and it wasn't kind of calming down?
In his practice, yes. In his practice, there were patients that had situations similar to mine that had these kind of hive situations for longer. And again, this is not something in my life we ever discussed, right? So I just didn't even know that something like this could happen. And it was a real rude awakening that I felt like, okay, I've got to now start getting to the bottom of all of this and why is this really happening? Which started, just a brand new health journey for me.
Yeah. I was going to say, in regards to the food allergies, in regards to the ones which was kind of anaphylaxis, was it nuts, or was it quite a few in terms of which ones was the most deadly? Like,
they believed, so the peanut tree nut was very severe for me. The doctors believed that there was cross-contamination of those items that night. But the new things that showed up, corn, which is like in everything, a fish allergy, it was like a perfect combination that night of something that had like, I'd had a severe allergy all my life anyway. And these new compounded, severe allergies, which showed up that night. And I think that everything just kind of went haywire that night. And I do believe, I talk about this a lot in my book, that this was, almost the universe's way of also kind of saying, telling me many things, right? One, looking for purpose in my sickness. Two, really getting down to the bottom of like, what's going on here. Three, starting to live in a different, healthier, better way that looked at whole body health, including the mental health.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
How old were you at that point where you kind of, obviously you've gone through this experience and now you're like, no, I really need to kind of look into this. I know you kind of looked at different areas of your life. What age was you when you felt like there's need for change? Like?
Oh, I was in my 30s. So, this was just a very long, I think that, this situation over the years since age 3, it was almost like it was building up, right? It was building up, right? And not really, there's no like fault or blame or anything, but the one thing that's also in parallel been getting unhealthier is the food in our country, right? In the US.
Yeah.
So our lifestyle, our standard American diet, the food that we create here, all of that was getting worse. It was affecting me because my system didn't, work well with it. And then my body, with these reactions that I kept having, it was almost a way that my body was rejecting it and saying, no, 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 like, we're not going to eat this kind
Yeah.
of processed, unhealthy, GMO type of food. And so, yeah, so I see a lot of parallels when I kind of started to really dig deep into, all these different areas of my life. So it wasn't just when I decided, like, okay, I'm going to go on this health transformation journey to really figure out what's going on. It wasn't just about the food. It was like so much more. Like, I looked at, the air quality in the environments that I was in, right? Spending a lot of time in the office,
Yeah.
spending a lot of time in my home. I looked at the products that I put onto my body. Are those causing other levels of toxicity in my body and my gut microbiome, right? So it was really and my degree, I'm an engineer by degree. So it's a
Okay.
very kind of like nerdy,
Yeah. Yeah.
analytical, deep dive dissection into all of this that no doctor ever helped me with, no doctor ever talked about. And today people still are not talking about this, you know?
And was it kind of journaling or kind of writing notes down about if you did have a food and your kind of experience of it, if it did make you feel a bit, maybe not going to have an allergic reaction, but if it did make you feel a bit queasy, was that how you kind of went about it in terms of journaling the
Yeah, I
different
mean,
experiences?
journaling was a piece. I mean, this was a full on, like, I moved a whiteboard into my house.
Oh, really?
I did a strategic plan. I
Yeah.
had a vision of like current state of health, future desired optimal health and well-being. What am I trying to achieve? Slice and dice every area: physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. A lot of testing, like very, very kind of, again, like nerdy, I call it, but a lot of
Yeah.
testing with practitioner team that I now put together. Just a ton of work on mental health, mindset to become, empowered, start letting go of fear. And so in my book, I put this all together in kind of this like nice little package that I call a 3 to B framework, which is like 3 steps, 3 pillars to be healthy, be safe, and be well in all things in life, right? Because that was like the grand wish of my parents for their kids. They wanted, their kids to always be healthy and everything and be safe and prosper. And that's exactly what I, set out to
Yeah.
do as well. So there's quite a lot of detailed work that went into it. That I now today, I am certified as an integrative nutrition and health coach, and sometimes I take on, one-on-one clients, and I help them because after 40 years of going through this, I have like deep expertise and experience, right?
Yeah.
And just here's all the tips and tricks you got to look out for.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get onto the bit of obviously in regards to how you overcome your kind of 32 food allergies, which I'm fascinated to kind of hear kind of your thoughts on that. If we just go back a bit earlier, in regards to obviously more people now are becoming kind of more allergic, it'd be great to kind of get your thoughts and insights into that. Do you have any kind of insights into why you feel more people are becoming more allergic or having more food allergies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated answer, right? There's so many factors
Yeah.
going on. There truly in this country, and I feel like I talk about this all the time, is there's no formal health and well-being literacy in this country. So we don't know. We have health class once in our lives, possibly twice, and then that's it. So we're not taught about anything about our body as a system. We are not taught words like genetic predispositions, right? So we don't even know what current state is, what future things that we might be dealing with. We don't know any of that. And then you factor in things like the food that we put into our body, the products that we put onto our body, right? From a mental health perspective, the stressors and the anxieties and the fears that we bring into our body.
Yeah.
There's so much of this that then affects your health, right? And when it comes to food allergies, I'd be interested to really understand, people with food allergies, how much do they actually understand how the food, when it comes into their body, how it affects their system based on their personalized health, based on their, genetics and genetic predispositions. I would venture to say most people don't even know, right? So So there's all these factors out there, and we can start to make these better decisions, more conscious decisions about like what we're eating. And of course, all the amazing, therapies that we have out there to combat this, right? Like introducing certain foods earlier. But even if you start to dissect that piece, it's really kind of an underlying, comment that food in this country is not about nourishment. It's about big money, right? It's about in
Yeah.
the United States. It's about, profit. It's about processing, it's about genetically modifying things. And we just don't know the effects on the body yet. And people like myself, people like yourself, who have these underlying issues, our bodies are just rejecting it. They're just saying, nope, nope, nope. And so there's so many different factors that really go into this.
Yeah, because I've spoke to like professors about this as well, and I think a lot of time it always gets just like environmental change and how that has kind of implications, and even now, like obviously more kids now kind of getting diagnosed with food allergies. But even in the UK in the 90s, I don't think they had a register for anaphylaxis, or it's only recently that people have been asking for this change to see how many people are going to anaphylactic shock. So they didn't really have that data back then. But yeah, it is interesting to kind of see how things are kind of changing. It'd be really great to obviously kind of talk about, obviously you kind of spoke about this kind of turning point for you. How did you go about then kind of finding a solution? Because obviously you kind of spoke about the kind of the Western medication, but then how is it different to your approach?
Yeah. So, my journey ended up becoming like this beautiful blending of both sides of my world, East and West. And so, what that meant is that when I left the ER that day in 2008, I was sent home with like a shopping bag full of like 30 pills that I would take a day. And taking that much medication for sure affected everything from my energy to having brain fog. And I was back at work, 2 weeks later. And just general side effects that you have from taking very strong, drugs and medications. So there was a time period when I had, a heart to heart with my mom and said, there's got to be a different way that, I don't have to be on this much medication, because who knows how long I would have to be on it. And that's when we started to really discuss things like Ayurvedic medicine, things like homeopathy, traditionally from places like India and China that work on root cause, right? So in India, Ayurvedic medicine believes that when you have a manifestation of hives all over your body, it's internal issues and heat trying to come out of your body, right? So that disease, those issues are
Okay.
trying to get out of your body. So I started to I became like, yet again, like like a researcher. I say when you're food
Yeah.
allergist, you're like a medical doctor because you know so much. So I went into like this research mode now to look at these other modalities to understand, when they talk about root cause, like what does that really mean? And how do we go about figuring that out? And for me, it was, becoming empowered to trust myself and know that I had to be on a new path right now. And the people that I brought onto that path had to also be aligned with what I was trying to do. So I brought into the mix, I had my allergist, I had my primary care doctor. I've now brought into the mix all MDs, a functional medicine doctor, an Ayurvedic doctor who also, did homeopathy. And these are actually medical doctors who have had a health transformation on their own. So a doctor who, had Crohn's disease and had gone into remission through a ton of, diet, lifestyle, the right kind of supplements, those kinds of changes. And there was a certain point where, and this was, of course, even in that first year, where I started to be able to reduce the Western meds that I was taking because I'd increased more of those natural supplements. This was all under, this team working together. So when it was the right time, right? It wasn't just about
Yeah.
like, I don't want to take these medicines. So that was really the beginning of understanding that my body as a system, how food reacts to it, how other things react to it, we did a ton of testing for the very first time in my life on gut health. We found out that I had leaky gut. I started researching, there wasn't a ton of research out there
I
at
was
that
going to
time
say,
about.
what's a leaky gut? Because I recently had a professor on where I know in the NHS they're doing kind of more studies now into the gut and food allergies. So yeah, what's a leaky gut for anyone who might not be aware?
Yeah. So so basically the theory around a leaky gut is around anything that kind of injures your gut lining can
Okay.
lead to this permeability, right? Intestinal permeabilities, if that injury is like very persistent. And the factors that affect this, are your diet, things like stress, that can really wear down your intestinal lining until essentially it becomes, permeable.
Yeah.
So again, like first time I've ever heard of this, no one for like 3 decades ever talked to me about this as a possibility. But what was really cool at that time that I was doing all of this was that I was just learning a lot, and I was connecting to and doing research on people who had just had health transformations in general, like not necessarily
Okay.
food allergies, but just like how did they become empowered? How did they really get down to like the root of what was going on? How did they focus on mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, and start to get through all of this, right?
Was there
That
many people out there at the time in terms of doing this kind of treatment where you could kind of reach out, and would you say it's quite a niche? It's quite niche in
uh,
comparison to kind of the Western medication.
yeah, in the integrative medicine, right, for whole body health has been out there for a long time. Functional medicine, right, has been out there. I don't find that in our food allergy world we really talk about this a lot. My viewpoint, is that I was looking for healing, and whatever I could do to heal my body, mind, spirit, emotions that didn't harm me was great. I was open to it. And you have to remember, I have done like decades of OIT that hasn't worked for me, unfortunately. I have done decades of, desensitization shots. I've done decades of medication. And so I had gone through all of that. And at this stage, I could have like yet again tried it again for another decade. But I was looking for something that was just more healing to me overall, because the side effects for me personally that came with all of that were very dramatic and traumatic. But it's to each his own, right? If that can work for somebody really young, if OIT can work for somebody really young, I absolutely say you should try, if you're open to it. Yeah.
And then obviously
Yeah.
within the year, obviously kind of that the hives kind of calmed down. When was that kind of aha moment where you kind of realized that you kind of eliminated your kind of 32 food allergies, and did you go for kind of an allergy test just to make sure before you kind of went ahead and then tried the food?
Yeah. So the hives started to, they were so raised, they started to become flat. And then over the course of a year, they were still like kind of splotches all over. We didn't learn that I was in remission, which is also the medical term for us, until 10 years later. So it was
Okay.
quite a journey.
Yeah.
So I tested, skin tested, blood testing, component level testing every year. Although I know insurance pays for it, every 2 years in the US sometimes, I just was like, we're testing every year because I was in a test and tweak methodology with a ton of data. So it was like biohacking, right?
Okay.
And so 5 years into it, around the time of my TED Talk, is when we had seen a dramatic reduction in the severity, right? So if you're doing, skin testing, and it's like I was like 4 plus 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 on everything. That's when we started to see
Did you
things.
discuss that in the TED Talk in regards to your allergies going down in regards to the treatment? I don't think in the TED Talk
I
that
didn't
was.
talk about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That talk was about building awareness around what's going on with the food in this country. It wasn't kind of like my personal project, I would say, at the time,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
It wasn't until right after that TED Talk, which is when I decided I have to write a book, because there's some incredible transformation happening here. There's incredible
Yeah.
learnings happening here, which is why I wrote the book. Yeah.
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 And I think for me it was obviously kind of the book and obviously eliminating your foot to allergies was obviously, if I was honest, like quite surprising, because it's not something you kind of hear about. Definitely not in older people as well. Obviously, I know with kids they do the allergy desensitization. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting, obviously curing it. So when you did the test, was it then shocking to kind of see the results from 10 years ago where you could see you severely allergic to now?
Completely. We rebuilt my gut health. We rebuilt my gut. And I think that was a huge lever for unlocking healing for me. So again, like in this kind of a methodology, it could just even be one thing that just affects your health. And there are millions of people out there with millions of stories. Like I said, I mean, my own functional medicine doctor, has had chronic health conditions herself, including breast cancer, and has been in remission from all of that through this kind of work, right? And these are MDs. So this is all science-based, evidence-based. And again, the reason why I pulled together my own team was because I wanted us to align on what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, what was safe for me, but with this kind of North Star in mind, right? And we didn't know that the allergies, would go into remission. It was more for me about aging healthily and just not feeling this way all the time.
So that was
right?
kind of like some kind of a benefit in regards to kind of doing this treatment, because I think
huge.
I think with the treatment as well, there's not too, like from what I've gathered, there's not any kind of scientific studies to say that it actually kind of reduces kind of anaphylactic or food allergies.
As for what? Does functional medicine reduce anaphylaxis? Is that
in regards to the Ayurvedic medicine?
Oh, Ayurvedic medicine. Oh yeah, I mean there is a lot of research on both functional medicine and like Eastern therapies in general. That for healing, again, right? Okay. So if you're asking, if I do Ayurvedic medicine, will I never have anaphylaxis again? Well, nobody can tell you that, right? These are these types of medicine practices are about getting to root cause and starting to heal. And that's exactly what I was looking for, right? That question of like, why is this happening to me? And how can I start to like heal my whole body health? That's what I was looking to do. And so after a decade of literally like dissecting every single area and spending a ton of time on things like oral microbiome, gut microbiome, things that are, products that are toxic, that are seeping into my body that might be affecting my system, right? Those are just not things we do in the food allergy world, right? So my path was very different because I was looking to overall heal my whole body health. And what it's allowed me to do is still today, I'm still on a very personalized regimen of supplements. Always carry multiple EPIs just in case, knock on wood, right? Always carry, have things like Benadryl in the house and stuff like that. Because for any disease, when you're in remission, it's incredible and you need to celebrate it. But I think forever in my life, I'm always going to ask, what oil's in your fryer? Do you know what's in this dish? Like I'm always going to ask. And I tell people, I've had a severe food allergies my entire life. And, when I eat out at a restaurant and, most of the time they're just like, you know what? We're just going to still put that you have a nut allergy. But the great part after all this testing, and you could do all the skin tests you want, and you can do all the blood testing you want, you have to really do the oral challenges. So when I started doing the oral challenges, after 2020, that was the true test of being able to eat nuts for the first time in my life, right?
Yeah.
It was crazy and
And when was the last time you've had
scary.
a reaction? When was the last time you had like a really severe reaction? Now, this would have been over 10 years ago, would you say?
It would have been in 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. So like since then, yeah.
Yeah, since 2008, there have definitely not been very emergent issues. There's been definitely like itchiness, things like that. But yeah, nothing, we found out that I was in remission in 2020. So knock on wood, still since then, no issues at all. And I've been eating the foods that I've been allergic to, not on a daily basis. Like avocado was something that I had a oral, issue with, and I also actually couldn't touch it because it was odd. My hands would get hives.
Okay.
And that's something because I love sushi, love Mexican food, so avocado is kind of around. So I would say that's even something that I've had a little bit more often. But actually, I got figured out I don't really love avocado. I don't love the taste of it.
That's all right then, yeah. I was going to say, have you found anyone like yourself who have gone through the kind of the same journey as you and have the same outcome in regards to food allergies?
I have, yeah. I have talked to people, and they are as well, interestingly, practitioners of some sort. So similar to me, they went into then that field because they had such a health transformation, right?
Yeah.
And again, like everyone's situation is so different. You and I have a peanut allergy based on our genetics and our genetic predispositions, et cetera. It's still going to be different. And that's why the world of even like, nutrition and health coaching is so personalized. So absolutely. I mean, like I said, in the world of functional medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, the doctors that I worked with, I didn't want to work with anybody who hadn't had their own transformation, if you know what I mean. Like I wanted to work with people that have literally been through it, figured things out, and that could now start directing me with what I should consider.
No, it's really interesting. I think for me personally, it's not something I would personally do if I was honest, but I'm always open to hear about your experience and how you kind of gone through it. And there's no right or wrong answer. Like what works for you might not work for me, and I think everyone's gonna have their own opinion. Yeah, I think because obviously I've spoke with professors about it even before coming on the podcast, and to see if there was any kind of evidence behind it, kind of thing. But yeah, like you said, you did it from a more kind of holistic kind of point of view, but obviously that kind of then in regards to your allergies kind of helps you in regards to then, because obviously if someone listens to this and they wanted to kind of find out more, is that the reason kind of you kind of wrote the book then to kind of share kind of your kind of foundations of how you kind of went about it?
So I wrote the book for me, primarily. This was my personal journey of transformation. Second, I wrote this to tell people that there's not one way, there's not one answer and one way to heal. So I hope everybody hears that, because your health journey is so unique to you. Even though we all might have nut allergies, yours is very unique. And I believe that what we're all trying to do is heal. We want to feel better. We don't want to be like clouded. We don't want to be lethargic. We don't want to be depressed because we can't go to this event and that event or eat this and that. In order to do that, we really have to figure out like what is going on. Like, why is this happening? That's a journey of healing, right? And in order to do that, that's why I wrote the book in a kind of systematic way to say, here's everything that I did. And yes, it's a lot and it took a decade, but at the end of it was an incredible transformation. Now, no doctor nor would I ever say, you can get it too. Nobody, right? It's just, it's a coin toss. But absolutely, there are mental health, modalities and exercises, mental health fitness, and there is emotional health and spiritual health and even physical health, right? These are science-based, evidence-based. When you make these kinds of changes, you will get healthier. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what the focus of why I wrote the book and kind of what I tell everybody. And again, like I've been through OIT, I've been through the allergy shots, I've been through decades of medication. Um, and perhaps there's a piece of that that, unlocked for me later in life as well, right?
Yeah.
So, but things that we didn't know about, like gut health, which is an absolute huge topic, I think, and as it relates to food allergies, these are just things that I think, we want to be informed about and aware about, as potentially like, something that maybe there's, like for me, right? I had leaky gut. I never knew. So
Yeah.
over the years, I was just compounding that. And I was, even probably more sick, and I just didn't know it until somebody actually had this conversation with me. So it's really, I would say just this transformation of like getting to know yourself and
Mm.
getting to know like your system and how, things interact.
Like,
And
uh,
then, and again, it's really a story of
yeah.
healing.
I was gonna say, like, you had like such a big team around you in regards to, you had allergists, you had all these different people kind of in the book, or even just from your experience. If someone was thinking about this, would they need a team as big as you, or is it a more kind of simple approach to it?
Yeah, I mean, great question. You are seeing in the US new business models around whole body health. You're seeing new businesses that bring together, so you as a patient can come in and they don't just treat your food allergy. They will help treat mental health, spiritual health, your emotional, the whole body health.
Yeah.
So these are new business models in healthcare in the U.S. It's still in its infancy. I think you're going to start hearing and seeing more of this. My first real recommendation, would be for you to just figure out like, what are you trying to do, right? Like, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? And a lot of this kind of research can be done, by yourself or even with, a practitioner. And then figure out who are the right people, your team. Think about this as a team. You're building a team, and that team could be 2 people or it could be 10 people. It's really up to you, right?
Yeah.
So I specifically chose practitioners that worked on both sides because I also wanted to have this conversation about kind of, how they viewed the body and kind of what happens with it. So for me, it was really just, everyone I think has a primary care here in the US. For
Yeah.
us in the food allergy world, we have an allergist, right? So they're
Was
there.
it any like conflicting information on both sides where you just kind of got to go with what's right for you? I can imagine at times.
There are some interesting conversations for sure between, my team as to, I mean, even the differences between like, IgE testing and IgG testing, right?
Mm.
And kind of what does it mean? And one being FDA regulated, the other one not. So, but again, I think those are very healthy conversations. And when you are rooted and aligned on, what we're trying to do is figure out like, kind of what's going on in Sonia's body that, keeps having these reactions over and over. I always say more brains, the better, right?
Yeah.
More ideas, the better. So in those conversations, when we, for the first time in my, 30 years, talked about gut health testing, it was just like, okay, what's that all about? Why would we even test that? So I think to come back to what you're asking, it's really, I think, sitting down. I hear a lot that people are trying to find the right allergist. And what they mean is like someone who kind of really can understand them, be empathetic, can help them figure out like what they're trying to understand.
Yeah.
I think that's the real first step in the food allergy world, is finding an allergist that is, my allergist is amazing because, he always believed this path is not about telling you that you still can't eat, more and more and more food, right? Yes, this is a path to, having you participate in all the wonderful experiences in life, and having you start to heal across your whole body. That was the viewpoint of my allergist as well, right? And he's
Yeah.
a Stanford, Stanford Yale guy. So again, like I think a lot of it is just kind of starting to have these conversations with your medical team. It could even be one person, it could be 10,
So yeah,
and feeling comfortable to do
yeah,
so.
it's kind of up to you, yeah, in that sense. You kind of spoke a lot about obviously having the right kind of mindset. Do you think that's been important for you throughout this kind of the whole journey?
It was game changer.
Yeah.
My first step in my book is changing mindset. Um, living in this world of like barely surviving, wanting to thrive, and not knowing how to do that, coming from a culture that didn't talk about or prioritize mental health and emotional health.
Yeah.
I was just on my own dealing with so much for so long. So I worked very hard, and again, just research like even like basic, like what is mindset? Are there different types of mindset? What are they?
Yeah.
Where's mine right now? How do I start to alleviate worry, anxiety, and stress, right, on a daily basis
Mm.
so that I can make the right conscious decisions for myself? That was the
Yeah.
game,
I mean,
right?
where did you start with that in terms of like trying to find that kind of right mindset to kind of start this journey? Obviously, we've got therapy here, but like where was your kind of starting point?
Yeah. So in this kind of like when I set out and started to frame like my strategy, right? A lot of that was digging deep, of course, and journaling. But, over the course of my life, I mean, I've done a ton of reading and research. And I'm somebody who actually will like go and talk to the person. I will talk to the physicians, I will talk
Yeah.
to the researchers, I will get all that research, right? And this is why as a health coach, if I work with somebody, that's what I help provide for them because a lot of people don't have
Mm.
the time. So when you're doing all of that, then you have an enormous amount of data, right? Now you're sifting through the data to
Yeah.
make sense of it. So it was very like I call it like very nerdy, but I learned so much, through that process. And then the data started to I started to even spreadsheets. I started to see trends in what was going on. So you asked earlier about like, were you writing down like what you made and how you made it feel? Yeah, I did. But I actually, was tracking how it made me feel physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And I was tracking this through apps, through devices like Apple Watches, things like that,
Yeah.
Aura rings, like you name it, right? My traditional world has been in tech. So these are just things that I know about. And then you start to see like trends of like what's happening and like, are the biometrics reading so that I'm getting healthy? This is all evidence based, right? So, but you just have to first put yourself into that world of like, okay, there is hope, there is healing, and I want that healing. So let me start to get my, head
Head
in
around it.
a
Yeah.
different game, right? Not the right game, but a different game, that is, that's something that, look, this process, it has to be fun. It has to be exciting, right? Getting healthy should be fun. It should be
Yeah.
exciting. It should be happy. Otherwise, again, for years, for me, it was depressing. It was super
Yeah.
depressing to be sick all the time and to have reactions at any moment, like you're out of the country or you're at a party or whatever. And I just didn't want to live that way anymore. 2008 was my rock bottom and turning point where I said, no more, just no more. And I'm not going to let anybody stop me from figuring out like everything I've figured out now.
Yeah. No,
And so that, yeah.
it's been really interesting. Have you ever? How's the response been in regards to the allergy community? Has the response been positive, or do you ever has it been any backlash? Because obviously it's not something you hear about every day. Someone who's kind of cured all the kind of 32 allergies. How's that kind of response been for yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, so for work, so I'm a global speaker. So so my job in a sense is I go around and do speaking engagements.
Yeah.
I'm an author of a book and I do some advisory work as well. So it's been incredibly motivating and inspiring for people. It's been very eye-opening. Like when I was saying that no one ever talked to me about gut health, similarly, I have people coming up to me saying, no one talks to me about it today.
Yeah.
Right? Should I research? Should I go online and read about it? And I'm like, yeah, go online, read about it. There are always people that are like, that's incredible, Sonia. I'm very happy for you. I'm fine with my path. And again, to each their own. I'm not here to tell you to change anything. I'm here to share my personal journey and what I was trying to do and then what I achieved, which was a true story of barely surviving, to thriving. So I think you absolutely will hear more and more and more about, sorry about that. I'm just going to shut the door here really quick. You're going to start to hear more about whole body health. You're going to start to hear more about gut health in the food allergy world. You're going to start to hear more about, mental health as a requirement for dealing with food allergies. Absolutely. And these are so as I go to the different conferences, food allergy conferences, I already hear it because I'm talking to all the parents.
Yeah.
Or I'm talking to
I'm
the
really
young
interested.
kids.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where the gut health kind of conversation and kind of the studies goes, and it'd be really interesting to see kind of more studies into that. And it seems like an exciting time. And with like mental health, I know in the US, like, you get like an allergy psychologist, but in the UK there's just not enough of them, so it's very hard for young kids to kind of get that access to getting that kind of clinical psychologist which kind of specialize in that. I was going to say, what's the next kind of few years, or what's next for yourself in regards to obviously you published the book. Are you looking at publishing another book, or are you looking at doing obviously kind of more talks? It'd be interesting to hear what's next for yourself, Sonia.
Yeah, I mean, so I travel all over the world, and my focus is really on that chronic condition world. So I work with corporations, and I do speaker series in corporations. I always tell the companies that I'm working at that the statistics you see around chronic conditions and disease and so forth, those people are not some other group of people. Those people are your employees, right?
Yeah.
So it's about helping everybody, heal and get healthy. There absolutely will be the next, book, and I, hopefully many more books after that. There's definitely some incredible collaborations going on right now on products, kind of in this space. So I'm just really, really, really like enjoying life right now, and it's a whole new world for me to figure out like how I live after being so restricted my entire life. But again, like, this is not about like going off the deep end and just it's very conscious living. It's being very conscious about what I put into my body for my overall health, right? Because I still have genetic predisposition. I'm genetically predisposed to type 2 diabetes, and years of just eating pasta has been horrible, right? So it's just kind of a whole new world, which I take one day at a time. But I feel like this story is so important to talk about, to again give people inspiration and hope that there is not just one way to heal whatever you're dealing with. There are so many ways, and healing begins by defining what that means to you.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that. And I think with the podcast, if I'm trying to do is, like, to give people a voice and to kind of share their experiences. And like you said, not everyone, it might not be right for them, but it might be right for the next person, or
Yeah.
And I think it's up to them really. But it's always interesting to kind of hear what kind of the experiences you've gone through and your journey and how you've overcome it. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast to kind of share that with me. If anyone wants to kind of check out your kind of social channels or your website, would you like to share that on the podcast?
Yes, soniahunt.com is the website. You can